You're it. I'm Amanda Malcolm, and you're listening to You're It Girl, a podcast focused on you and what propels you, because that past, it does not define you. Your time is now, and you're it, girl. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to You're It Girl. Thank you, as always, for listening. We have a repeat guest on today. My dear friend, Patrick Corley. He's going to introduce himself and just, say a little bit about him, where he's from, his background. What's your deal, Patrick?
My deal is that you and I have been friends for 14 years.
Long time.
And we're going to get to the intro in a moment. But before we get to the intro, let's go to the last episode. I was here once before.
Yes.
And I got some unsolicited feedback from some people that it was really, it was a great awareness. So
what was the feedback?
Well, the only one that really made me think was that someone said that I interrupted you 5 times. And
Who would even be watching that? Sorry, I don't mean to be critical, but did you? I mean, whatever. We're having a conversation.
But let's think about this for a moment.
Okay. Sorry. I just interrupted you. Go.
Look at that. So let's think about this for a minute. So part of what I was sharing with you last time was the importance of listening. Being present, listening with compassion. The topic was trauma. What's it like to date a woman of trauma, etc. And I went back and I listened and I heard those 5 times where I wanted to make a point and didn't let you fully finish. Okay? So it had me thinking more about our dynamic on the show that day.
Yeah.
It had me thinking more about who you are as a host on the show, the guests you've had, the topics, the value, all the things that you do with and for people by delivering these messages on the show. So I just wanted to say to you, I'm sorry I interrupted you 5 times the last time I was on your show.
Patrick, I didn't even notice that. So it's okay. Apology accepted. I mean, on the show, I like people to be able to share their thoughts and experiences. And I know what it's like to be in the middle of a thought and then not be able to finish. And so in your defense, sometimes when people are sharing things, I have a tendency to kind of say something in between, just to show that I'm listening. But I've been told lately that is me actually interrupting and not letting them finish. So interesting that somebody said that. But no apology necessary. No.
Well, interesting. So how
I don't take it
does
quickly.
What you just did show up in your relationship? So you just justified and gave me permissions to interrupt you. You diminished the importance of the apology.
My gosh. Here you go.
And you did not really recognize that from a place of authenticity. I was aware of what I did last time, and you were saying non-valid. Don't worry about it. Let's move along.
You know what's really interesting about that? I think I told you on the phone. Yesterday, 2 days ago, when we were prepping for this episode.
But we barely prepped.
We didn't prep. So on this episode, I guess you still need to introduce yourself, but whatever. You can just introduce yourself whenever you're ready. But on this episode, Patrick and I had decided, he said, would it be okay if we did another episode? And then I've got some questions I wanted to ask, and I'll ask you them. And if you want to respond or not respond, however you want to take this, it's up to you. And I said, sure, absolutely, I'm up for it. So I have no idea what he's going to ask, but that is an interesting struggle in my relationships. And that definitely comes from, this is something I'm working on with my life coach. It's come up just recently. And I started analyzing other relationships and how I've shown up in that way. And when someone does apologize for something or have something important to say, generally I will feel I'll feel bad that they felt that particular way. In my mind, a lot of times, I am easygoing when it comes to those sorts of things. So it's not I don't feel like I was interrupted. So when I respond in that way, it's kind of it wasn't really a big deal to me at the time. And so when that person is telling me something like you just did, my natural response is to be oh, don't worry about it. You didn't hurt my feelings.
But what if it's not fine. About the apology? What if it's about an attempt to connect?
That's a good, a different way of looking at it. That
okay.
I guess sometimes in a relationship, those things can happen to me. And again, okay, so this is what I was going to say. So it's been pointed out to me in the most recent, or the relationship that I'm actually in, that when I'm confronted with something, that my natural response is to diminish, is to try to make the other person feel better, is to want to get through it as quickly as possible, to not have the confrontation, very uncomfortable with confrontation in a relationship.
Yeah.
In business, I can do confrontation just fine. I'll still feel anxiety and like dysregulation, but I can snap into this like different type of, not different person, but I can like snap into my strength and like respond appropriately. In a relationship, if someone says something like that, I go totally calm, totally fawn, make excuses for why it's okay. And then oftentimes that person will say to me like, doesn't really feel like you really were listening to what I was saying. Like it was kind of about me, not about you, and just like accept my apology. You diminished what I said and you moved on because you didn't want to deal with the confrontation.
So we're going to move on now, and thank you for the explanation. My name's Patrick Corley, second time on this show. I once came here and said that I have a green spray paint business where I run around painting red flags green, and when the storm comes, they're red again.
Yes.
And we determined that that's not the real story. I'm local. I have a media company, digital media project management company. Amanda and I have been friends for 14 years. And so we're going to save all the holiday pleasantries and everything. We've got a countdown today, a hard stop. So Amanda, next question. These are notes to Amanda. This is our notes to Amanda
session. This is an interesting episode.
I would like to begin, Amanda, approximately 7 years ago, you invited me to a tour of the offices of Child Crisis Arizona.
Yes.
I met staff, foster parents, foster children, and I don't remember if I was uncomfortable with the environment. I don't think I was, but I remember it was humbling.
Yes.
And when we got in your car, do you remember our conversation as we were leaving the parking lot?
I don't.
You don't remember?
No. What was our conversation?
I said to you, who or what inspired you to get so affiliated, so deep and so connected and committed to making a change inside of Child Crisis Arizona?
I do remember that now.
And do you remember your response?
I don't remember if I told you the depth of it at that time. Yeah.
You said, I knew you were going to ask me that question as soon as we got in the car.
Oh, interesting. Okay. This really brings me back.
Okay. So in that time, and I said that was about 7 years ago. We've known each other 14 years. Here's another note to Amanda. So I've come to know you as an authentic, powerful, beautiful, and feminine woman over 14 years. That is often what the public sees. But how do you see yourself?
Wow. Oh man, Patrick. Well, it's mixed. I think sometimes, I'm just going to be honest, that's what I do on this show.
Is that what this show is?
Yeah, that's what it is. So, but this is really, wow, you're really like penetrating, like deep, like provoking some deep thought. I think I'm like starting to sweat a little bit.
Shall I repeat the adjectives? So this is how I've come to know you. Think about this as authentic and powerful and beautiful and feminine. That's the way the public sees you. But inside, because this is our show and segment started as, dating women of trauma and what's it like to date Amanda. So if these are the questions that I would want to know if I'm someone meeting you for the first time or on a date with you.
This is true. This is what the public sees. This is how people would describe me for sure. I'm known that way in business. And this is what generally in relationships, men are usually very attracted to at the beginning. Like I do show up in that way.
Roll it back. Answer the question. How do you see yourself?
I'm going to. Give me a second.
I'm interrupting.
Give me a second. So the authenticity piece of it is definitely something that sometimes I do see in myself. And being strong, I can handle a lot of things and I feel a lot of strength sometimes when I'm doing and accomplishing a lot of things. Generally in business, that is true. In relationships, it's very different. In relationships, even though on the outside, I show up as very strong, on the inside, I feel very weak. It doesn't happen. It's not the initial relationship.
And
like
what does
early
weak
on.
mean?
I feel in relationships, like I lose footing at a certain point in time when things start to become vulnerable. And this is something that I'm constantly working on because my demeanor and personality and the way that I feel comfortable showing up starts to kind of change. So at the beginning, it will be authentic and strong and happy
during
and positive.
During the introductory offer.
And then as I start to get closer to this person, I definitely falter to find my footing. And a lot of that is because things start to happen from a confronting perspective in the relationship, like you're getting to know each other. And that's the part where this is really hard for me to answer because it's hard for me sometimes to find adjectives to describe things and feelings. And so oftentimes when I'm talking to like a life coach or a therapist, I'm like, give me the words and then I can respond. And this is super, super common to be able to actually articulate what it is that you're feeling.
Yeah.
And so that's what feels weak, if that makes sense. That's the part that feels like I can't articulate it, so I don't really know, not that I don't know what to show, but I don't know how to show up.
It's almost confusion then.
It definitely is. It's a little bit foggy and yeah, so it's difficult to articulate. It's something I'm super aware of and I'm trying to figure out, but that thing that I show up as is, I don't want to say, it's not a facade because there's a lot of ways in the relationship that I stay authentic to myself, that I am strong. But once the true like connection piece of it, you really start to get intertwined with that person. I tend to lose myself a little bit along the way. And that's why I say like, it feels not strong, but more weak. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And it's interesting that this is where you are now in life and you've got, more years of experience and awareness and coaches and mentors and therapists. So when you were in your late teens or 20s and being a young lady or woman who caught the eye of so many men, how did you handle it then? And how is it different from handling it now?
I think actually I handle it the same now. Usually with men, as far as men pursuing, I'm never overly flirtatious. Like I'm very, very strong in how I do show up. I don't really get into situations where men really cross boundaries with me at the beginning. It's really fascinating. If you were to compare like the beginning of a relationship or the first encounter with someone and how I won't let someone cross a boundary. But once I'm in a relationship, I cross people's boundaries and I let people cross my boundaries all the time. Initially with men, I think they don't really know maybe how to pursue me because I have like a very like strong personality type kind of like up front. So they'll be attracted, but they're like, I don't know if this girl really likes me. And if there's somebody that maybe doesn't mean well, they won't cross a boundary because they're like, oh, I can't get away with this person. So it's a really interesting kind of dichotomy because that changes later on.
Wow.
Once I get to know somebody in a relationship. But I've had a lot of friends that have had, negative experiences with men in the workplace and that sort of thing. It doesn't happen to me. And if someone crosses a line, I have friends that will reach out to me and say, hey, Amanda, this is happening. Can you help me construct a text message or what does this phone conversation look like? How would you present it so you can set a boundary so you can stay nice, stay professional, but be direct and shut it down? I can do that actually pretty easily. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I've always been able to do that since I was young. Situations that my mom put me in kind of taught me that.
I can see that. I think from the male perspective, it's much more simple than that. We're just simpletons, right?
Mhm.
And so for us, it's really it's a judgment conversation. You said that a man may not know how to approach you. He may not want to approach you.
Could be.
Right? And he's just making things up based on what he sees and what your interaction is with others on the first interaction.
Mhm.
So, the allure of who you are is very enrolling to many men. This goes to something you said a little bit ago, but I want you just to listen to this.
Okay.
So the allure of who you are is very enrolling to many men, like your last boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
It also is one of the characteristics about you that ultimately leads to their demise and resentment within the relationship. So how do you navigate that now based on, for example, your last relationship that went sideways quick?
I'm learning how to navigate this. I think part of the challenge is, and in Alenka, who was on the episode just before I released yours, we were talking about her episode was Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. Why this man do I fall, right? Like why consistently am I attracted to this type of person? What is it that, I hate to use this term, but like, where is it that I'm the problem? And I don't say it in like a negative way like that. I said that to my life coach the other day, and he was like, "You're not the problem." Oh, I can't wait to hear that. I'll finish first, then you go.
Yeah.
I can see in the beginning, like how I show up, and it is very alluring because generally, and I hear this from men, they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, like you're so positive, like you're so successful, like you're so authentic. Like I love how you show up. I love how you dress. Like I love how you do all these things. People always like you. You're genuinely likable. You always say the right thing. I can take you anywhere. You're socially acceptable." Like all these things. And so in their head, they're like checking off all of these boxes and they think it's great. And then later on, as things start to become a little bit deeper, a little bit of that strength kind of wears off. And this person that I think that they thought didn't really have a lot of needs at all suddenly has some. And a lot of times I'll sacrifice what I really think or what I feel for the other person. And then it gets to a point in the relationship where I've kind of lost a little bit of myself. Now there's a shift from like me kind of, I don't want to say running it, but me kind of like being totally fine and like off on my own and being independent to suddenly being codependent. And so that change happens. And I start to change, what I do or my availability to accommodate them. I think that then there is a shift in like a power dynamic. And then all the things that were really alluring are now things that are threatening because now other people find that alluring as well. And even though they have now gotten this thing, they're like, I don't know if I really want this because now this is a little bit threatening because this person shows up this way, not only for me, but, to everyone else as well. And so I don't think that sits very well after a good amount of time.
There's no way it sits well with a lot of men. But you said something in our coffee, a couple of months ago, and I didn't know it until you said it that day. And then I really, truly understood
what was it.
Because we were comparing you to a previous relationship that I was in, and you pressed for the issue, and the similarities were striking about trauma and decision making and how you show up and the presentation and all of that. Remember? So you genuinely, authentically told me you really do show up this way for you. First and foremost, it's for you.
Yeah, I like it.
No doubt about it, but I don't think I know that men don't understand that.
No, they
assume it's, look at me, I want attention.
Yep.
Look at all of the whistles and ribbons and fireworks and lasers and everything shooting off of me and the colors for attention. And you know why? Because that's what men would do if they needed attention.
Oh, interesting.
But for you, it's truly who you are. It's important to you. And this is how you show up. It's who you are and how you feel and present your best.
Because one of my mottos is like...
And I really would not have ever known that. Now, as many years as we've known each other, it's never had any effect on me because I'm always, we've worked together. So
Right.
I'm like, oh, she looks great for what the project is today, right? There was no emotional consequence to me. But to everyone else, but these guys, it's they see it as you're making it about you because you want all eyes and attention on you. That is not true.
It is not true. And some of my one of my mottos is like, if you get ready, like you never have to get ready. So that's why in the morning, I just always get ready. I'm like, then you don't know, like whatever happens for the day, like you're always just ready to go. Like who knows what's going to happen, but you're always ready and you just feel better. Like you feel good. Even if maybe you're having a bad day, you just feel better. Some of my friends have said that they've started doing that. They're like, you know what? You're right. There's something like psychological about it that you do feel better, more at your best when you do that. Maybe that's being a perfectionist, but whatevs.
Well, that's a whole other episode.
Yeah, we're not talking about that today.
When writers and directors receive a movie script for the first time and they know nothing about the story, they read the title and based on that, they hope for something. They start hoping, oh gosh, what could this be? The same could be said for people who are handed an introduction to someone for the first time. What do you hope for when you meet someone for the first time?
I mean, when I meet someone for the first time, I hope that that person is being authentic and true to who they are, that they're communicating in a way that, again, is authentic and that we're establishing a connection that we can kind of decide by the end of that date, like, is there a compatibility or not? Do we have enough, likes, dislikes? Are our goals in the long term the same? Because now with where I am, if this is a dating question, it's a dating question or just meeting somebody random, like
let's
business.
call it a dating question.
Dating question. I think that, yes. So everything that I said and being able to, just know if there's if there's a possibility of this ending up in a second date or a third date. I think I want someone to show up as themselves, be confident in whatever it is that they're saying, and hope that they want the same thing in the future, like long term, that I would want. And that's not always the case, but that we'd be able to establish that like in first date. I don't think this is realistic.
Right.
It's not realistic.
So you'd hope that they'd be authentic.
Yeah.
That would be that's number one driver.
Yes.
Number two,
that they have authentic confidence, know themselves.
And what would be three if there was one?
I guess be able to communicate where they are in life and where they want to be.
So how do those three things relate to the trauma of your life growing up in your family?
I mean, as I get all shifty.
Because
break
we all
that
know
down a little bit. Break it down a little bit.
So we
for
know
me.
your first two episodes.
Yes. I think everyone does at this point.
So there was a lot of, you grew up having to be inauthentic about how things appeared on the outside, to the outside world, right?
Yes.
So starting with that as a first point, do you ever find yourself being back in that place of trying to hide, protect, cover, decorate, or not present in an authentic way?
Myself now, no. This is why I talk about all this so openly. And, on a date, I will, if someone asks a specific question, I will say like, this is a little heavy. Like, how deep do you want me to go? Like, I talk about this stuff on a podcast. So this was one of the reasons for me why I launched the whole podcast to begin with, was because the way that I did present to the world, I was like, there's still an inauthentic piece, and that's the piece that no one knows about. And there's a darkness there, and I want to bring it to light. And that is what really helped me become even more authentic and actually like be able to feel, because that was the part that I was hiding before, as I couldn't feel that. So when I'm on a date and someone shows up in that way, like I hope that they can do the same thing. But I guess you're right. Like that would be very difficult for many people, because I spent a lot of years doing that and not wanting people to know these dark things or where they came from, or letting that past come out to the forefront at all, because then someone may judge you or prejudge you for something that has nothing to do with you, just because of a situation or a circumstance that you experienced when you were young that you had no control over. So I guess it's not really possible for people to maybe sometimes show up in that way right away. You know, that would be difficult.
Yeah. And what do you think are the number one or two reasons a man would show up inauthentic with you when meeting you for the first time in a date scenario?
Well, I think, and you can correct me if I'm incorrect about men here, but everybody wants to show up on the first date as their best, right? And a man, if we're talking about like masculine, feminine roles, like the way that he shows up is to his natural tendency is like to be strong, to be a provider, to be a protector. So on a date, most men, if they're like masculine in that way, that's how they're going to show up. And those parts that are, you know, dark or maybe trauma-based would show some weakness. And that's not how you would show up, I guess, as your best, as a man, of how you'd feel maybe on a first date.
Like, why would you talk about those things? Are you saying that how a man would naturally show up is masculine based and needs to be strong?
I guess.
Okay. No, really. So, and because that would be okay.
And this is how what society has taught us too, right?
Possibly. But let's go back to the movie script. Mm-hmm. Would you ever be hoping for a balance?
Oh, for sure.
Okay. And what would that look like? How would you know? If you want strong and masculine showing up, where would you, I guess that would come with time. You'd see maybe more of a balance then.
You know, what's actually interesting is the relationship that I'm in right now. It started off very different, where it started off in a very intense conversation about past experiences and parents. And I didn't initially date this person right away, but it was very different than how other men have shown up on dates. This was actually really quite vulnerable. And for a little bit, it kind of freaked me out a little bit, because I was like, whoa, this is like kind of a lot. Like I shared a lot, you shared a lot. That was a lot. Like that was an intense conversation. And
on the topic of what?
On a topic of past experiences, how we were raised, things that really affect us. Mm-hmm. But now there's such a deep level of understanding because those conversations were had so early on. But that's the first experience I've ever had with that on like a date. Most of the time, the person that I'm meeting, I think is, well, they're probably actually very similar to how I used to show up. Like showing up as being this extremely authentic, this extremely strong, like this extremely charismatic, assured person that travels, has a great job, like all these things. That's the mirror. But behind it is a lot of other stuff. And that stuff doesn't come until later when they're entrenched as well.
Interesting. Because see, I would want the authenticity. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want the glamorous
no, I want authenticity.
I want the authenticity.
I think everyone does.
But I think our definitions of authenticity, I don't mean mine and yours. I mean the expectation of what is authentic, right? Mm-hmm. Because like you said, you were like, ooh, that was heavy. That was a lot. Gosh, not what I'm accustomed to in a first intense conversation.
No, that is authentic.
Yes, it is.
1,000%.
So
that's what I'm saying in a different way.
So yeah.
Because obviously I'm dating this person now.
I got that part. But I'm saying that I don't think the majority of the initial conversations between man and woman initiate that way.
They don't.
You know what? Let's move on from there.
Okay, move on.
So we've heard a lot about your mom and a little bit about your dad. I think we've only heard a little bit about your dad. A little bit. So one of the two has endured a much tougher go of it being your parent. Mm-hmm. Would you say? Mm-hmm. And what is the most powerful lesson your dad taught you?
My dad taught me loyalty. And trust. He has never, if you tell my dad something, he's the type of person that even though he may never give you advice, which is so annoying, he'll never tell you what to do. And sometimes you just want your parent to tell you what to do, but he'll never do that. But you can call him with anything and your secret is always safe. He will never tell anyone. He will be loyal to that, maybe to a fault sometimes, but that is what he taught me. And that's where I think my loyalty lies when it comes to friendships and things. He taught me that. And then you always know with that person that no matter what happens, even if they're not able to, like my dad has difficulty showing emotion, like quite a bit, but you know that that's there. So when something terrible happens, that's your call. And you don't have to have like an explanation for it. You don't have to explain yourself. You can just call.
There's no judgment.
There's no judgment.
So
no
he
judgment.
taught you loyalty and non-judgment.
There you go.
Not a lot of advice.
Nope.
But loyalty and non-judgment.
There you go.
Okay. That's super powerful.
Yeah, those are very powerful things. And my mom taught me many others.
I had similar. Your mom taught you others. I had similar. You could call him, write him, ask him anything 100% of the time. No judgment. Now you always had the opportunity to make the mistake in every category once. The second go around was, why are we revisiting this again? But there was never judgment, and he always did have some advice or suggestion, which I told you in the last show didn't mean he was right. And I've collected a lot of those things in my head and taken them into relationships. But it's interesting. That's clearly important to you in your relationships now with men and this man. And what is your current boyfriend? Can we talk about him?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll tell you if we can't.
Okay. And let's not call him current. Let's just say boyfriend.
Okay, boyfriend. Yep.
That's like when somebody says, "Oh yeah."
We don't know when this will be
when
released.
Somebody says,
"Oh,
your dad or your mom." When you're talking with with a co-parenting. No, they're not your dad or your mom. They're dad and mom.
Yes.
Right. So I think what are the things, the similarities you're seeing with your boyfriend about loyalty and non-judgment in him that remind you, if anything, about your dad?
Definitely the loyalty piece of it, and the trust. So far, you don't know how that's going to manifest over time, but so far, the loyalty to the people that they're close to. Others, like that's not. My dad's kind of similar in that way. Like when you're in the circle, like those people, you're always going to be there to support and be loyal to and show up for. The judgment piece of it, I think it's the same with people that person is close to. So I guess, there are some similarities there.
So for the last segment of this episode, something strikes me as interesting today that I had never considered about you. So is it reasonable to say that you have in your career as a entrepreneurial realtor, agent, part business owner, that you've been wildly successful in blending your personal life with your professional life and the things that are so that you don't have these two separate existences?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. What I have heard you emphasize no less than 3 times is that yet there's this emotional distinction between the two.
Yes.
Of who you can emotionally be as a woman, a partner, girlfriend to this relationship versus who you are being for your clients or your coworkers or the outward public.
Yep.
That strikes me as complicated.
Oh, it's very complicated.
And I'm not in judgment. I'm really curious and interested because I'm totally the opposite. I've worked hard for 15, 20 years to really blend the two so that I am the same person no matter which audience I'm talking to. Even here today with you, I'm just being my authentic self in these questions and the notes to Amanda that were prepared for today. So it is complicated for you.
Complicated. Where
does the struggle show up sometimes?
The struggle only shows up. This is hot on my list with my life coach right now. Number one. And I'm not even a coach. Number one topic.
It is?
Number one topic.
It's almost as if I am understanding you.
Number one. And this is going to take, I think, a long time for me to unravel. I know where it comes from. I know what it stems from.
What is it?
It all comes from childhood stuff. So we don't want to, everybody I think knows enough without going deep enough into it. But the reason why it's a challenge, it's not a challenge in friendships. It's not a challenge in work relationships. It is only a challenge in romantic relationships. And it's because the emotional fear of like abandonment and loss it's so much for me that in a relationship, it's really hard for me to show up in the same way that I do the other things. I can at first. And then when things start to become vulnerable, then there's a huge fear. And so we're talking a lot about this. Like why only here? And this is a hyper independence thing. I'm reading this book right now called You're Not the Problem. It talks about the characteristics that you develop by being raised by a narcissistic parent. Really good, by the way. Super good. My therapist recommended it to me. But anyway, that's why. And it's in this romantic piece, and it's because of the emotional like depth and connectivity. It's hard for me to separate the two, or not separate the two, but have it be equal. I just can't show up in the same way.
So I heard you say that you're acknowledging that it is a fear-based component within your personal relationship.
And that is hard to say when I first realized it. And I know this now. Okay. It's fear-based component. Paralyzing fear-based component.
And though you like your clients,
love them.
You'll go to the end of the world for them. You'll do anything and everything for them. At the end of the day, there's a contractual agreement, and the deal either closes or it doesn't, and you move on to a next set of client responsibilities on the next project. And the other one is potentially a lifelong project with a person with no contract except to bare your heart and soul.
Exactly.
Okay.
No pressure.
Well,
no pressure.
Okay. So, well, thank you for sharing that, because I'm not your coach. And I'm not here to offer you anything unsolicited advice, but what would it look like if Amanda, you, had more of a balanced way of being with interconnected personal and professional, that if you weren't fear driven in your personal, and one could argue, a therapist could, that you've successfully mastered doing it in work and professional environments because you've eliminated any and all possibility of fear.
They do argue that. Oh. And that's, yes. I mean, the fear it's not something that's going to be like unraveling or earth shattering or life changing. You've already proven that you can get over that just fine. The relationship piece of it is so much different. So what it would look like if I can actually regulate that is like, I would be able to be much more at peace with myself and my emotions, and be able to understand that something that's happening with somebody else in a relationship has nothing to do with me, that it's simply their experience in that moment. Just like you talked about the apology at the beginning, that's their experience. They want to apologize. Let them do that. Accept that. Don't diminish it. It has nothing to do with you, just like in business. This has nothing to do with you. This thing is happening. It's intense. It's extreme. Maybe there's lots of negotiation. Maybe somebody's mad. Not my problem. In the relationship, if it could be the same and I could understand that and really embrace that, then I would be able to probably have a much more successful long-term relationship and be more at peace with myself and my emotions on a more consistent basis. That's the goal. You like that?
I like it a lot. Amanda, we're going to wrap here in the final minutes. I have another question based on everything last one. Your daughter, Kennedy.
Yes.
is gathering a set of life experiences being your daughter. And what would you say is the number one fear that you learned as a child, took into your teens, and still experience on a physical, neurophysiological, visceral level that you want to make sure that you raise Kennedy in a way that she doesn't have that experience?
I don't want her to feel trapped in her body with her emotions. I want her to be able to express herself and why, and be able to stand on her own 2 feet and explain how she feels and not feel bad about it. And I'm doing a good job of teaching that. If only I could teach myself. But it's a lot easier to teach your child because you're so petrified of having them have this experience. And she doesn't have to deal with a lot of things that I had to deal with. So it's much easier. And she's very vocal about her thoughts and feelings, which I embrace. And I don't want her to have to deal with that because it's debilitating.
Mm-hmm. And thanks for listening and sharing and participating in notes.
Thanks for leading the show.
Notes to Amanda today.
I love it.
And these weren't necessarily questions I had along the way for 14 years, but just some of our conversations and about life and what's happened and for you and for me. And based on the last episode, I thought it would help listeners to get underneath some of the things that men, average man, simple man, would want to know.
I love it.
So thank you.
I like your take on it. Thank you. I appreciate you coming on this show. And thanks for the notes to Amanda.
Got it.
I don't want to call it an interview, but you did an exceptional job of leading the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. That's your It Girl.